Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your evangelist of the imagination, and the still unexplained existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am once again robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is, of course, Robservations, the show about something. Robservations, episode number 685. Breaking news, Everything Always. The channel Everything Always is reporting that Namor will be appearing in both the Eternals and be the primary villain in Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever, which makes sense since Namor once flooded Wakanda in the comics. So it makes sense that, he'd be tied to the Eternals and, of course, but if he's in the Eternals, they've already cast Namor, and they've kept that under wraps. Maybe that's why we haven't seen a sequel. I don't know, just a rumor, but it was reported by Everything Always, the YouTube channel that is always giving away a PlayStation 5. So many of you might know that I scour industry journals and industry information on a daily basis, trying to find interesting stories to talk to you about. And one of my favorite, now I'm not endorsing them, I'm not endorsing this site necessarily. I will tell you this, I love it, I subscribe to it. It's put on by a man named Richard Rushfield, and it is called The Ankler. The Ankler, giving Hollywood the business. You can subscribe to The Ankler, and usually there's some pretty insightful material that you can read there about the business of Hollywood, which you all know is one of my favorite things to discuss. There used to be a woman named Nikki Fink, and she wrote a column like this, and I kind of see, or she had a site like this, and I kind of see Richard Rushfield as sort of being her successor. He didn't really succeed her, but in a way, the way I enjoyed reading her column, I enjoy reading his column, although I might give an edge to Mr. Rushfield. So if you are interested in the business of Hollywood, might I suggest that you subscribe to The Ankler. That said, the reason I felt the need to give him a plug is I'm going to read his shit. And because I'm going to read his shit on this channel. I mean, I don't mean he writes shit. I'm going to read his stuff. And I would be remiss, as you know, I like to give credit to all the people whose work that I steal on this show. And I try and steal from the best. And I read this article that was published on The Ankler back on May 7th, 4 days ago. And I had not caught up with it, and I caught up with it today. And I was like, you know what? This is a long article, but it has some great insights that I think are worth hearing. Plus, I just like the way it's written. So again, this is the 2021 SHOWBIZ State of the Union, as written down by Richard Rushfield of, in case you didn't get it before, of The Ankler. So there you go. And I'm going to read this because I really liked it, and I figured I'd share it with you. Citizens of showbiz, amigos of entertainment, friends in flim-flammery, I stand before you tonight to report that the state of our union is very messed up. We are beset by two twin perils, working arm in arm to drive this industry, if not over a cliff, then straight into the middle of a desolate swamp from which we may never emerge. Here is the two-headed hydra that approaches from somewhere in the murk. 1. Hollywood has lost its grip on the world culture. 2. We are rebuilding our industry in a way destined to dismantle the creative machine that has driven entertainment for a century. But beyond that, some things are good. The Titanic has never been more comfortable ship to cruise around on. To start, let's take a step back to that terrible night that shook Hollywood to its core a week and a half ago. Oscar night. Why was this year's show such a tragedy playing out before our eyes? All Oscar shows are terrible. All award shows are terrible. But this one was a little more embarrassing for trying to put the elephant in a tutu. but at least they tried. Ordinarily, you might be able to shrug away the cataclysmic ratings fall to the extraordinary times. And if it doesn't, who cares? But these are not ordinary times for the industry. The systemic collapse of this year's show revealed the hollowness of the core that we're all sitting on. The greatest conglomeration of entertainment the world has ever seen on our biggest night of the year, center stage, spotlight right on them, were unable to entertain, and they didn't seem terribly concerned with even trying to. They couldn't make jokes. They couldn't touch the heartstrings. They couldn't even speak to the concerns of anyone outside of Hollywood. Since the Academy last assembled a year ago, there's been a little world historic event that disrupted the life of the entire planet, not to mention killed millions. By my count, the show made 3 extremely passing references to this happening. That's why it felt like an extinction-level event, the night that Hollywood elites walked away from the audience, and vice versa. Even with the inner circle's resident genius and innovator at the helm, they no longer have any understanding of who is the audience, why are they watching, and no longer particularly care. And the whirlwind will be reaped. A better analogy might be that this was Hollywood's Ceausescu speech, the moment the crowds turned on the god, and what had been authoritative and inspiring in an instant became ghoulish and pathetic, and his grip on the public slipped away fatally. When one thinks of the mad swirl of entertainment in millions of forms from every corner of the world now available to all of humanity with a thumb swipe, and compares it to that rigid, hapless, self-important, sad gathering of last weekend, it's impossible not to feel that something has irrevocably passed from our grasp. I think of the words of the poet Cavafy in his The God Abandons Anthony. At midnight, when you suddenly hear an invisible procession going past with exquisite music, voices. Don't mourn your luck that's failing now. Work gone wrong, your plans all proving deceptive. Don't mourn them uselessly. Go firmly to the window and listen without emotion, but not without regret, the whining of a coward. Listen, your final pleasure, to the voices, to the exquisite music of that strange procession, and say goodbye to her and to the Alexandria you are losing. We might just take the lack of response to this debacle as proof in itself. Under normal circumstances, if Hollywood's biggest show had lost 3/4 of its audience in half a decade, you would expect that a community interested in audiences would pull a few fire alarms. If there was a time when the panic button might be useful, this would be it. Instead, we get, it'll bounce back next year. Or better still, all the award shows are down, which is like a president of the United States saying, my approval ratings might be in the toilet, but hey, all politicians are down, as though in the presidency you have no power other than to just float on the winds of secular cycles. On the upside, since I last addressed the nation of show business a year ago, diversity, in storytelling at least, has ceased to be a completely empty promise. We have, miraculously, seen a beginning of a golden age of black dramas. If you look at the upcoming film slate of no less than the Disney Company, one can no longer say that movies are just the tales of white men. Miles to go before we sleep, to be sure, but finally there is more than lip service afoot. Thanks to the streaming world, more niches, demographics, and affinity groups are being served entertainment tailored to their experience than we could have imagined just a few years back. But then you come to the flip side where you ask, where is all this leading? For the industry, for our influence as storytellers. The optimistic elite case is that while film may have become, in their eyes, a loss leader legacy business, we can all adapt and accept that streaming services are the center of the world. Premium subscriptions today, premium subscriptions forever. Easy enough transition as wrenching transitions go, and yet, a few weeks ago, Deloitte, I don't know how to pronounce that. I mispronounced it. Deloitte released its annual digital trend survey, and here was Variety's headline on the findings. Gen Z ranks watching TV and movies as 5th among top 5 entertainment activities. 5th, as in number 5. That's movies and TV combined. So while we have been having this fascinating debate, what's a movie? What's a TV show? A couple of generations have come along and said, "Great talk, old-timer, but we don't want either of those." When you look at the cultural movements shaping our world today for good and lately much more often for ill, how many of them are coming out of streaming series? Yes, The Queen's Gambit got some buzz and Mandalorian is a hit, but does this really feel like where the center of gravity is? In a world of TikTok and Twitch and Roblox and YouTube? The kids definitely don't seem to. Will they grow up and learn how to sit quietly and watch TV series just like their parents do? That has not typically been the history of media. Just ask the newspaper industry, which, amid 30 years of declining readership, felt it was just a matter of waiting for generations to grow up and pick up the habit. How did that work out? But even with the streaming world, there are many buzzy things, many things that capture attention for a few minutes, even many very, very good things floating around. But in this transition where entertainment became content, there is nothing that feels very special anymore. Hollywood turned its back on the cardinal rule of entertainment, the one absolute, immutable law that has ruled culture across the universe since the dawn of humanity. Leave them wanting more. We now give them too much of everything. More entertainment content than you could ever hope to consume. And that is just from streamers. Forget about YouTube, TikTok, and so forth. The consumer has been given what they want, and they're choking on it. Is there any wonder that nothing seems particularly special? That we're serving this conveyor belt of atomized, ephemeral experiences to provide a tiny little jolt that you can't even remember a second later because you've received 20 other jolts by then? Hollywood is not capturing dreams anymore. It's funneling a flood of impressions. To go back to core competencies, if we're not the dream factory, then what good are we to anybody? And now the really bad news. So much for the culture and estrangement for that. But even if none of the above was true, when you look at the corporate side, our basic infrastructure, there is still cause for terror. The great streaming war is on. Our studios are, with one exception, betting their futures on winning at least part of it. And yet no one seems to accept that this war will ultimately produce not just winners, but also, amazingly, losers. The consequences of losing this war will be dire. And you know what happens if you bet your future and lose? Let's start this look at our corporate state with a couple of propositions. 1. You cannot have all the studios infinitely spending with no hope of return. And 2, when there are fewer studios, their priority will not be let's maintain this industry's level of spending forever for everyone. The feast has been served, but it will end. Not all of these services are going to find audiences anywhere in the neighborhood necessary to sustain anything like this arms race. If you look at the playing field right now, you'd have to bet that most of the people out there won't. You can't make an infinite number of mega-budget shows forever without something to show for it. You can't operate on these budgets and then not become the next Netflix and expect investors to support it for very long, particularly after the market bubble pops. What's most dire is that in the race to win streaming, they're mostly turning off the spigot on the flow of revenue from the movies and all the downstream revenue that those properties throw off, the rides, the toys, the cruises, etc., etc. 1,000 shows into the streaming era, having seen exactly 0 of them turn into the kind of products empire, I think at this point we can say, for whatever reason, see above to under atomized, ephemeral, oversaturated, that streaming productions just don't seem to inspire franchises. These services will live on their subscription revenue and die on their subscription revenue, or maybe subscription plus advertising at best. So when the bill comes due, what are you left with? We can quibble with their models and where this is taking them, but let's take at a given that Netflix and Disney have reached escape velocity. You've got a couple of essentially vanity brand burnishing services in Apple and Amazon whose vitality will wax and wane on the whims of their overlords. They will be here or not, depending on factors that we mortals have no ability to gauge. Based on how it's going now, would you bet any of the other streamers making it? Collectively, you figure one or two must because 4 or 5 feel like the right number, but which one or two? And will they really? With Peacock, you've got a service that seems almost like a placeholder waiting for a real service to be inserted into it. As it turns out, there's another service out there whose company seems utterly lost in the stars of Hollywood. So let's say that Warner's and NBC Universal come together. That gives you 3 services, with, of course, 2 question marks left standing. Does Paramount sink or swim, or most likely fold into one of the others? How long can Sony keep a giant studio aloft on this arms dealer's strategy? How long will streamers pay a premium for Sony to serve as an intermediary between them and producers when they've got phones? They can call the producers themselves any old time. As the competition heats up, not only will the pressure intensify for the streaming warriors to bulk up, i.e. buy another studio, the zero-ish sum game here will also make sense to take another player off the board. This is all just a mind game now, but not in the very long at all term. It's conceivable that Hollywood could be transformed from a vibrant competitive landscape or of 6 or 7 studios to an oligarchy of 3 studios with particular niches carved out and a few odds and ends floating around. What then? To take a step back, why Hollywood? Why does this collection of people in this location continue to be allowed to dominate the world's entertainment market instead of being sent back to wherever they came from to find real jobs and do something useful for a change? Hollywood survives as the world's entertainment capital because for 100 years now it has been able to produce entertainment of a quality in bulk and on a scale that few can rival. Why have we been able to do that? Not because it's the place where Dwayne Johnson lives. He's a 16-hour flight away from anywhere. And not because it's where Disney Corporation put its headquarters, or because we have the phone numbers of people who write checks. Hollywood is able to produce so much because this industry has amassed an extraordinary level of expertise across every micro component of entertainment manufacturing, from finance to lighting to makeup to writing, directing, agenting, marketing, and feeding the crew. There are hundreds of thousands involved in what we call Hollywood who have mastered the myriad nuts and bolts of making entertainment. Dwayne Johnson may sell the picture, Tom Rothman may give it the green light, but it's the vast middle that produces a product at this level of professional sheen. The vast middle from a financial perspective is the very thing that tech companies were designed to eliminate. Whomever the final 3 or 4 are, they will live under a set of rules drawn by our conquerors from the north and enforced by their fanboys from the east. Why should we care if this set of tycoons replaces our old set of tycoons? Because this set of tycoons, despite all their utopian happy talk, have run their businesses on principles designed to squeeze out the unions, push out the people who keep the place running, and anyone who isn't the top talent, in our case brand name showrunners, and turn everyone else into minimum wage disposable contractors. All in the service of bringing every bigger bonanza to investors and creating ever more impregnable monopolies voraciously looking for the next industry to capture. For now, while the streaming war rages, checks are flying everywhere and the crews are kept busy. But don't be under any illusion that when consolidation comes and things settle down, that this way of life is going to last forever. JJ and Shonda will get untold riches. The new studios, the winners, will deliver more to the shareholders. But why do you think the shareholders love the Netflix model? Because they're excited about the possibility of supporting a city full of union employees in perpetuity? As a result, Hollywood will increasingly deliver shows and films written and lit and edited and marketed by Uber drivers. Given the drift of how people are consuming these days, this change might not even be noticed. So what is the solution to my little apocalyptic reverie here? If the future is preordained, why not try and enjoy the ride over the waterfall? Because there is still a force that we can reach for, a force that has sustained this town from its inception, that has the power of erasing everything I've spoken to you about tonight. What the talk of subscriptions and algorithms and efficiencies leaves out is the other basic law of this industry. Hollywood is a business of hits, and a hit can change everything. A hit being not something that gets a little buzz, gives you a little bump in your quarterly numbers, but that monster come out of nowhere surprise that fundamentally changes the way everyone thinks about the possibilities of entertainment. There is no knowing where the next hit will come from, but you know where it won't come from? Doing more of the same. The only thing we know about the next world-shattering hit is that it will look nothing like anything we're seeing right now. A very wise Ankler friend pointed out that the winner of the streaming wars will be the one with the highest tolerance for failure. That is, the company that is willing to take the most chances and fail the most, and has deep pockets to bankroll that failure. That's who will be the one that finds the next hit or hits. At this moment, that clearly would be Netflix, but it shows many signs of trying to move away from the mass failure model, so who knows? But that one hit can change everything. We can dismiss Peacock now, but one or two sensations, and we might be talking about them more than a placeholder. The scary thing about the Oscar show was that it revealed how little interest our current Hollywood establishment has in breaking any mold. Even in the year where there were no films, where they screamed in advance that this time they were going to change everything. What that came to mean was making the most minor tweaks served with a few extra helpings of self-importance. My fellow citizens of show business, all is not lost. It nearly is, but that knowledge shows that this is the time to take chances. In the past few years, Hollywood as an industry has undergone the most wrenching self-examination in its history. This didn't come out of nowhere. Its failings have been massive in how it treats women and employees, and how it hires and showcases diversity. And so a fairly massive amount of self-flagellation is not uncalled for. That process of change has painfully begun and still has a long way to go. But let's not let our deficiencies become our doom. Opening the doors should mean an opportunity for Hollywood to break the mold and renew itself. But if our sinking elite class clings ever more tightly to what shreds of the status quo they can find, they could well take us all down with them. Good night, may God bless you, and may God shine on SHOWBIZ forevermore. After party on Geffen's Lido deck. And that, once again, is Richard Rushfield in The Ankler. And if you are interested, you can subscribe to The Ankler. I think it's like $10 a month. But for me, it's worth it because it's one of my favorite reads in Hollywood. And again, for all of you, I am not affiliated with The Ankler in any way. I don't even know Richard Rushfield other than following him on Twitter. And I like his articles. But I think he brings up a lot of points here that we discuss a lot on this show. On one hand, I think that there's a lot of great stuff. He brings up The Queen's Gambit. That was certainly a water cooler show. And The Mandalorian, look, it's so strange to me that we talk about The Mandalorian as like, well, it's the only good Star Wars that is out now. As if, like, it's just strange to me that for the first part of my life as I call it a professional imagination connoisseur, and I begin by saying I was a professional imagination connoisseur at 13, working in my first video store, back when there was barely any video stores, but I was getting paid for my knowledge of cinema and my love of just being surrounded by it. But one of the things back in the day was there was so much excitement happening. And back then, Star Wars was at the forefront of all that. I mean, we went from Star Wars, which is not called Star Wars A New Hope. It was just Star Wars. Empire Strikes Back was the first time you saw Episode 5. And then, of course, they changed Star Wars to reflect Episode 4, A New Hope, and all that. But back when I started as a young, fledgling professional imagination connoisseur, the idea that Star Wars would be anything less than revelatory, I wouldn't have believed it. When Return of the Jedi came out in 1983, even though I wasn't satisfied with it, a lot of people were. And it still provided us things like, well, speeder bikes and Jabba the Hutt. And we got to see real interaction with the Emperor and Vader and Luke. So it was still delivering the goods, and it was still something that was amazing. The idea that we would have a whole trilogy, or now 2 trilogies of Star Wars movies that a lot of people don't exactly think of as fondly as they think of the original trilogy is strange to me, but here we are. And I've talked about on the show quite a bit about how all of these entertainment choices, I mean, even I, I've become, as you know, completely obsessed with the idea of a 2-hour period of time and what you, looking for entertainment, how many, you could watch TikTok videos, you can play video games, you can play virtual reality, something in VR, you can go to YouTube, and it says that Gen Z, the last thing on their list is watching television and watching movies because those are inherently passive entertainment. Now, I still love the form. I do think the future of entertainment is going to be a hybrid of VR and gaming. I mean, VR is gaming, I guess, but I think VR also, look, I can't wait to, like, there are going to be cities in the world that I'll never be able to visit. But eventually, you're going to be able to take beautifully photographed tours, walking tours. You could probably get on your own treadmill, get on your own treadmill at home, put on a VR. If you've never been to Florence, I've never been to Florence. I've always wanted to go to Florence. I've never been there. But eventually, someone is going to be able to create an incredible VR walking tour of Florence. And you can either just stroll the streets, you can go into the museums, an entire virtual experience. Combine that with a, say, treadmill or some kind of a, I don't know how that's going to work, but where you literally could do the same walk that you would do in real life, the same amount of steps, see the same amount of things in real time, or however that's going to work, whether it's a more sophisticated Google Earth, that's coming down the line. And when that happens, I think that we're going to have a fundamental shift in what kind of entertainment people have, more so than we even have now. Movies, you're going to be the star. You're going to be the protagonist. It's going to be a combination of narrative, video games, hybrid. I mean, literally, and however that virtual, it's going to be like a holodeck. It's going to take a while for us to get to a holodeck, but it's going to come close. And this is coming down the pike. And as I've said, don't take it. The difference is now is entertainment is no longer passive. You can watch TikTok videos, or you can go make them. A lot of people, I'm not saying that people are going to make the next apocalypse now, but the fact is you can put yourself in a video and suddenly you're your own movie star. And when you go out, if you want to go on to Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or put whatever up that you want, you get instant feedback. Part of what's going on here on YouTube, especially with these channels, I mean, I'm just one guy that sits and talks into a camera for a number of hours a week, but people come. You imagination connoisseurs, you come and you listen to me. And again, I'm obsessed with the idea of if I were to spend 3 or 4 years making a movie, or the script that I've been working on, trying to get it out now, there's a movie I've wanted to make for 33 years. Let's say that I get to make it one day. It's a 2-hour movie. Are you going to be as entertained by that movie as me sitting here talking to you for the same 2-hour period of time? What makes those 2 hours equally, are they equally valuable? If someone spends $100 million on a movie that takes years to produce or years to develop and then finally a couple of years to produce, is that 2 hours of entertainment more or less valid than me talking to you on the screen right now? And I would say that, well, it really depends. Depends. You become the person who decides how valuable it is. Because look, I like movies. I love movies. I've been passionate about film since I was a little kid, but that doesn't mean I don't want to sit down and watch a great YouTube video, a great discussion between keen minds. I'll go to one of those Oxford discussions. I don't know who's on. Sometimes I watch those Oxford discussions or a TED Talk. I don't even know who these people are sometimes, and I don't even know anything about their subject matter. But I'll sit down and I'll watch it, and I'll feel illuminated, and it'd be something that 5 years ago I couldn't see, or 10 years ago I couldn't see. And we're living in an era where entertainment is changing. Movies and movie stars don't hold the sway over our culture that they used to have because, well, there's now, before, the only game in town was movies and television. Over the last 40 years, that has completely changed. Completely changed. And one of the things, say, whether it's a good thing or not, what we've proven, at least through this movie pundit fan space, is what we've been doing is connecting. Human beings are connecting to other human beings by what they're saying, what they're doing. You're building a community around, I'm here spouting off at you, but we have interaction. The whole point of this show is it becomes, I'm talking now, but we have interaction on this show. That's what I think makes it appealing to people. As a matter of fact, today, for you who are interested, if you want, I will once again, I haven't had people on the show in a couple days, but if you have a decent camera and a decent microphone at some point, maybe in the next hour, I'm going to drop a link in, and you too, who want to be on the show, could. I would ask you, though, if you've already been on the show before, please refrain and give somebody else a chance, because I always want to meet new imagination connoisseurs that I haven't met. And to let you all know, remember, if you become a member of this channel, you can become a member for as much as $1 or as little as $1 a month, but you're still supporting the channel. We do have these Zoom calls, which you are under no obligation to participate in, but they're pretty fun. And the last couple, over the last month, they've lasted many hours because I've kept everybody talking, which has become a lot of fun for me. But the entertainment business is a very different place now. And while I think people will always like narrative because getting caught up in a story is always fun, but the thing is, again, as Richard Rushfield points out in this Ankler article, that's because the generation, my generation and the generation maybe one before me, we grew up that way. That's no longer the case. And passive entertainment, like newspapers, I thought that was a great example Rushfield used, that, newspapers were waiting around. I mean, newspapers were, what was they, the 18th, 19th century? The town crier or sending out papers. I mean, I loved newspapers growing up, but there's no reason to have newspapers anymore when you have the internet. The only difference is that, unfortunately, how do you monetize things? I mean, the great papers of note, like the New York Times, have been compromised. And before, you used to be able to trust entertainment. You used to be able to trust journalism. You could never trust entertainment. But journalism was something that was respected. You'd watch 60 Minutes and you knew that, well, I'm going to watch 60 Minutes and this is something that's going to really be important for me to see. Whereas nowadays things are sort of changing. And it's too bad. I used to deliver papers. I had a paper route. I had 53 houses on my paper route. I had a few more on Sundays. But I loved my paper route. I loved reading the newspaper. I loved taking it home. I loved reading. But the first things I read were the op-ed section in the A section of the paper, and then the next section in Seattle, the Seattle Times, I delivered the Seattle Times, would be the calendar section, the entertainment section. Not a day went by that I didn't read the op-ed section and the calendar section, and then also the A section. I never had any interest in the sports section, but I would read a lot of the paper, and it meant something. It seems silly now. I mean, my God, there is no more newspapers. I don't know if anybody reads newspapers or what they read, but, we all go on the internet. So one of the things about virtual reality that I look forward to coming down the pike is not just experiencing cities, but doing anything. Like, you can even watch, well, now you can. I know people that watch this channel who actually program virtual cinema experiences where you can program in your favorite cinemas, and you can even probably at some point, pick your seat. So, look, I would love to have if somebody said to me that all the theaters that you used to go to, whether it was I would love to go back and sit in the John Dance Theater where I saw Star Trek the Motion Picture and Superman the movie, and sit in a virtual, the same way you'd see it in your peripheral vision. You'll have virtual reality. I just saw the PlayStation 5, the new VR is coming out soon. They'll be able to do that. So your entertainment, not only will you be watching a movie, but you can recreate the experience of walking into your favorite theater, of what that's like. I mean, I think a lot of people wouldn't care, but if I could go back into the Coliseum, certainly the UA 150, and you could program the movies like the way you want to see them. Like, I want to walk in to the King Cinema that was across the street from the UA 150 on 6th and Blanchard. I want to walk into the old King Cinema on the day, I think it was probably November, December of 1977, where I saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You'll even be able to recreate the experience because they'll fix out the sound field. You'll probably have an additional thing in your VR glasses. They'll give you surround sound that'll be able to approximate all that. The same thing will be true of when you want to go take city tours. It'd be amazing. You'll have an entire city virtually there for you and they'll even do it where you can walk into stores and poke around. I mean, it'll be pretty interesting. It's going to take a lot of work, but it's coming down the pike. What makes sense? I don't know. But, as much as I still want to make movies, I think what Mr. Rushfield was dealing with or talking about in this article is very true. The world is changing. And what he was talking about, another point that he was making, is that it's the expertise in knowing how to make films. There has never been a bigger schism between the people that are greenlighting films in terms of understanding how films are actually made. And I'm talking about, the higher ups at places like Netflix and Amazon. They've got deep pockets, but they know less about the actual day-to-day making of movies. I certainly see it in post as well. There's a lot less people, the very experienced people that really understand post. Like, I'll give you an example. As you all know, if you live in New York, by the way, Tango Shalom will be playing at the Brooklyn Film Festival. That's, I think, the next place it plays. As a matter of fact, let's see. Let me just make sure and tell you, not just the Brooklyn Film Festival, which I think is in the first, I think that's the 1st of June sometime. You'll have to look. It's online. You can find it. But, of course, Tango Shalom, the movie that I produced and I also edited and was the post supervisor on, and the visual effects supervisor, it already played. Well, yes, I need to find more because I must update that. It's playing a lot more different film festivals, but Brooklyn it'll play. And so check that out. But, I was the post supervisor on that film, and I was doing a lot of interesting ways to how do you make an indie film, an A-list 4K finish, and do it on the cheap. Well, I was doing things I don't think anybody else has ever done, at least. I couldn't find any tutorials online to help me out. I was kind of making it up as I go, a new way to do post that saved us a lot of money because we didn't have a lot of money to spend. But there's not a lot of people left as the business gets younger and younger and younger. Let me tell you something. Finding a colorist, somebody who can grade your film, finding someone old school who's been doing it for 30 years, it's getting harder and harder and harder. And you really want somebody who knows what they're doing. A friend of mine works and he does QC, and boy, he tells me horror stories of where a lot of these very well-funded shows, when they start going through the post process, there's a lot of mistakes that are made these days because people just don't know. But anyway, it's an interesting time that we're living in, and I'm optimistic because we're getting... Entertainment is like everything else. It's just changing. I think, like the article pointed out, we are getting a lot of, it does seem like there's a cacophony of lots of noise, but very little things that remain memorable or that break through, that sort of reside in our imaginations. You're from one thing on to the next. The thing that I've heard the most people talk about in terms of an experience, that the way they wax rhapsodic. There was one thing, and I have yet to play it, was the video game Ghosts of Tsushima. People talked about that like it was something that that was an unforgettable experience to play that video game. And, I heard a lot of people talk about the Queen's Gambit, but the Ghosts of Tsushima, I'm still hearing about 2 years since that game was released? People still talk about it. Maybe that's where we're at. Maybe movies have already been supplanted, because when I was a kid, video games didn't provide the experience. They couldn't because there wasn't the technological know-how we weren't there yet. But nowadays, my God, gaming is incredible. Like I can't. One of my most eagerly awaited things to get this year is that new Hot Wheels game coming out. It's a Hot Wheels racing game. I love racing games. Please do another SSX for the PlayStation 5. I would love to get that. But anyway, just something to think about. What do you think about the state of entertainment? And thank you once again to The Ankler and Richard Rushfield for writing that piece. First person we're going to hear from is Joe Dick. Joe Dick's been writing in a lot. I have a great fondness for Mr. Dick's letters. I like them. Hi, Rob. I'm a bit worried about the Eternals. I'm not losing sleep over it, but I want it to be good. I'm kind of burned out on superhero movies, and I've skipped a lot of them. This one I care about because I dug the original comics so much. I liked the mid-'80s revival, and I even liked it when the Destroyer took on the Celestials in Thor. But doesn't this cast look too old to play ageless immortals? I like a lot of the cast, especially Kumail Nanjiani, very talented, funny guy. Angelina Jolie, Salma Hayek, very talented, but too old. Are they? I don't mind that it's a diverse cast. Kirby drew them as all white, but of course you couldn't do an Eternals movie with an all-white cast. I don't think, nor would you, because if they've been on the Earth for thousands of years, why not have them represent more? It's 2021, Rob. Get with the program. Feige would end up like Mussolini, killed, stripped naked, upside down in the town square, pelted with tomatoes. They were supposed to represent Greek gods, so cast Greek actors, although no one cared when DC cast an Israeli as Wonder Woman. It's not necessary to have actors of the exact ethnicity or nationality as the characters. Okay, so have a racially diverse cast. Instead of being from Mount Olympus, they could collectively represent all of humanity. Fine. But they're too old. I guess they're going for near immortals who age more slowly, sort of like the wizards in The Lord of the Rings. I'm less crazy about the gender swapping, especially with Ajax, based on Ajax, a human hero from the Iliad. In that war, the only women fighting were gods. How is Ajax part of it? It would be like making Porthos a chick in The Three Musketeers. Actually, I take that back. That might work. That could be interesting. Why not then make Thena a dude? That's only fair. There were already enough good female characters in the Eternals. My favorite was Circe, based on the sorceress from the Odyssey. Now Circe is Asian. Okay, but why is she in love with Icarus? That was never in the comic and seems to negate the faux feminism behind a lot of gender swapping. Why not instead some wife swapping? The Eternals could all be swingers. Of course, gender swapping isn't always bad. Maybe it's because I didn't watch the original, but when they changed Starbuck to a chick for the remake, I didn't mind. That was a great character, and works better as a female. I don't know that they would have done that for any PC or woke reason, but just so it wasn't such a complete sausage fest. I hope my use of the word woke doesn't trigger anyone too hard. It's not like I'd refuse to watch something with a female lead character. One of my favorite shows is the 1990 Australian TV show, The Girl from Tomorrow. I wasn't bothered by the two leads being two girls, and I didn't think I should be. I was a big fan of the cop show Rizzoli and Isles with Angie Harmon and Sasha Alexander, or Killing Eve, which I stopped watching because it got too ridiculous, not because of it having two female leads. I'm certainly not bothered by a racially diverse cast if done for the right reasons. My intro to the Green Lantern character was Jon Stewart through the animated Justice League. I would have really dug the Justice League movie if they'd made it more like that cartoon, as in true to the characters and also fun instead of a dark and gritty snooze fest. Jon Stewart isn't a rape swap, of course. Did I say rape swap? Isn't a race swap, of course. The example people always give of how that can work is Nick Fury. I guess it's easier to take with relatively minor characters. The Eternals don't have a place in pop culture that Superman or Spider-Man do, so if you race and gender swap them, few people care. And like I said, a case could be made for having the Eternals represent all of humanity. Not that they do. Shouldn't at least the polar Eternals be Inuit? It will be interesting to see how Marvel explains the Eternals in action in recent MCU events. They'll have to break out the tap shoes and do some real fancy footwork, like how they tried to explain Wakandan in action, all those evil European empires rampaging across Africa, the transatlantic slave trade. I skipped Black Panther because I always thought he was a lame character. Aren't all Panthers by definition already black? They have to be. They're not a species. In the old world, a panther is a black leopard. In the new world, it's a black jaguar. Only call him Black Panther if you're doing it as a blaxploitation movie, which I suggested wisely for Black Superman. Lex Luthor as the evil honky mad scientist. Awesome. Thanos, I thought, was an Eternal. Yes, he was. And I think they're going to touch upon that. They did nothing to help, unless it will turn out they were acting behind the scenes. I've skipped a lot of these movies, which I found boring, so they might have changed Thanos' backstory a bit. I preferred his original motive for killing, to impress death. I guess he's still from Titan, but is he an Eternal? Where is Zurus? Jack Kirby never wanted the Eternals to be part of the main Marvel universe. It means doubling up on gods. The Eternals are relegated to mere representatives on Earth of the Olympians. If he'd created them decades later, he might have retained creative control. That trailer bugged me. It was so padded out with so much other garbage. Show me the Eternals. What a ripoff. I'm still going to see it because I dug those comics so much. The basis for the Eternals was the books of Eric von Däniken, Chariots of the Gods and its sequel. A lot of nonsense about aliens building the pyramids and stuff like that. Good basis for a comic book, though. I do wonder how Kirby would have ended the Eternals story if he had the chance. Anyway, I hope this letter wasn't too long for some people, to use the parlance of our time, too extra. Joe Dick. P.S. The identity of race swapping is usually justified by the ridiculous idea that a person can only identify with someone of their own race. What about swapping of sexual orientation? I forgot to mention the gay Eternal, Phastos. He wasn't gay in the comics. I loved his character because he was an inventor, a gadget guy, a gearhead. Even though I'm none of those things, I'm also not black. But I loved his character. Why change him to being gay? It makes no more sense than race swapping or gender swapping. Eternals can alter their form at will. They could alter things like being straight or gay with ease. Well, Mr. Dick, I like this article. I like the letters that you send me. All good questions. Look, I think obviously we are passing through a time where the idea of representation has now become at the forefront of everything. Right now, I'm sorry to say, it's fashion. It's fashionable to be this way. Everybody's bending over backwards in order to join whatever this is supposed to be. Now, I've said on this show, I believe personally that the more people are given a voice, the more different kinds of people, the more diversity that we have that is allowed to speak and is truly heard, the better off we are as a society. Also, if people that have been marginalized finally get the chance to tell their stories on television or in film, we can only be better off because we'll be getting more stories we haven't heard before. And that can only be a good thing. Unfortunately, like everything else, you can't replace one oppression with another. And I feel we're definitely going in that direction. I hope not, because like the article said that Richard Rushfield wrote, we're almost in a renaissance now of black stories being told, all kinds of black stories being told. And I think that's a good thing. It can only be a good thing. I particularly liked them. And I think there's a lot of stuff going on that I'm enjoying hearing about, sometimes for the first time. I have nothing but admiration for all of these creators that are finally getting to tell their stories. And I think more people should join in the fray. But when it comes to things like comic books, I mean, maybe, of course, look, the comic book industry was founded by white males who were trying to appeal to other white males, and other people joined in because as generations went by, more people were interested. Minority creators, female creators, they all jumped in, and everybody has a place now. And I think it's fantastic. But, you know, it's problematic now. We live in a world where, like you said, the Eternals, my whole thing is this. If you're going to race or gender swap, or you're going to swap someone's sexuality out from the way something was originally conceived, don't do it in a tokenistic way. Don't just have Sulu kiss his boyfriend in a modern Star Trek movie and be done with it. Give us a real examination of what does that mean? You know, what does it mean if you're a gay man and you're on a starship and you leave your significant other for long periods of time? Is it different between two men than it would be between a man and a woman, or a man and an alien, or a man and anyone else, or a woman and her boyfriend or her girlfriend, or a woman and her alien paramour? Does that have an effect? Are all relationships the same? Like, what does that mean? Do you have to negotiate a truce that I love you, honey, but when we're gone, you know, I want to be able to see other people or have multiple partners or whatever. Really get into it. I feel like right now it's just fashion. I'd like something in my entertainment to really delve into. What does that mean? You know, if you're going to change a character from being white to turning them to be black, like, say, Superman, well, what is the difference? Is there a difference between if an alien who is black, who comes to America in 1938 and grows up to be Superman, you know, say in the 50s, how is the experience of a black Superman as opposed to the experience of a white Superman? You've got to incorporate that into the story, because you're still dealing with the Jim Crow South. Does a black Superman go to the Jim Crow South and help people? Or does Superman say, I'm not from your planet, but I do look more like the people from African descent than I look like, say, you Northern Europeans. And I don't like the way you treat people, just as a matter of principle. Just because someone looks like me, a black Superman would think, well, that's utterly ridiculous. People look the way they look on the outside because of where they grew up on the planet, where their ancestors grew up. Why are you discriminating against them? I'm an alien, and this whole planet, I'm hearing everybody's voice. And you know what? When I hear people cry out, I don't know what color they are. I just know they need help. So maybe I'm not going to help people unless we drop those Jim Crow laws in the South. That could be interesting. That I'd like to see. What happens when the most powerful man on earth is also despised by a number of people around the planet they're supposed to help? That to me is an interesting story. I'm not saying you should do that, but I would be interested intellectually in something like that. But look, I look at it this way. I'm really excited for the Eternals. I'm really excited that we have a different kind of a filmmaker in Chloe Zhao. I'm interested to see how they handle it. I know it's going to be covering thousands of years of history of the Eternals on Earth. Everything sounds appealing to me. I can't wait to see where they're going to go with it. So we shall see. Yeah. This one comes from David Miller again. Greetings, Rob. Thanks for all the good works. I don't mean to use you as a personal messenger service. Why not? But I'd like to respond to one of the letters you read recently from Undead Sick. So, with your permission. Dear Undead Sick, I want to thank you for sharing your letter with Rob in the Post-Geek Singularity. Your letter touched me. I'm sorry you experienced bullying growing up. I know that it seems that if you're a fan of genre entertainment, that a certain amount of isolation comes with it. And I know that when you exist in that isolation, it feels that you're the only person to which the bad things are happening. And it becomes really easy to downplay your accomplishments. So let me tell you, I'm pushing 60, and I have yet to own a house. And when you mentioned you had bought your own home, I was totally impressed. After hearing that, all I can say is, I'm a fan. That's all I have to say for now. Just know that you are part of the Post-Geek Singularity family, and we're in your corner. I hope we hear from you again. We all bring our own slant to the entertainment industry, and it enriches us all to hear. I look forward to your next letter, Undead Sick. Take care. Dave. Well, Mr. Miller, I've always liked you. I think this kind of a letter is one of my favorite kinds of letters. Anybody who wants to send me a letter and respond to other imagination connoisseurs with, you don't even have to agree with them, but please use respect. I am happy to share those letters. I love the fact people take the time to write me and that I get to read your letters. And when somebody wants to share a letter like that, and David, you say that you appreciate, I've like Undead Sick, I believe we've heard from Undead Sick twice. And I love those letters, so I hope that Undead Sick sees this and realizes that indeed this is what being a part of the Post-Geek Singularity is all about. This next letter comes from Horace Wimp. Horace Wimp. Horace Wimp says, Hi, Rob. I just wanted to say I love what you do. I've been watching for a while now, and quite a lot of the science fiction you talk about here on Robservations goes straight over my head. I was wondering if you could recommend some science fiction films, TV shows, and books that every imagination connoisseur needs to have watched or read. Oh my God. Many thanks, Horace Wimp. Well, Horace, you know what I need to do? People keep asking me that, and I need to make a definitive, my top, say, 25 of each thing. 25 movies, TV shows, music, books, comics, and maybe even video games, even though I'm not as well versed, that I feel that everybody needs to see. And I can direct people to that because I get asked that question a lot. So, maybe I think I will do just that. I'd have to think about that, but I will do that. And I think that's a great idea. Horace, so thank you for writing in. I appreciate that. Gerard Dizon writes in, Greetings, Rob. Wait, Cat in the Bag, think Mark. Love the latter line, hate the former. Love the latter line, hate the former. Think Mark, you like Cat in the Bag. Yes, Cat in the Bag is a Dieter thing. Although I have to say that there's also a line, Cat in the Bag and the Bag's in the River, from Sweet Smell of Success that I love. Greetings, Rob. I was listening the other day to you and John discussing about the inevitability of Avengers 5. That caught me by surprise. I never really had thought about it, maybe because of the amount of films they have lined up until 2023 or because of my lack of knowledge of the comics. What surprised me even more was your confidence in even stating that there would be an Avengers 6, 7, and 8. You then said if you would do the Hollywood math, it makes perfect sense to have those movies, which I agree. If you look at the franchises that have a long list of sequels, they do share one thing in common: great box office numbers. What perplexes me is what could even be in Avengers 5. I don't have a clue since I don't read the comics, so I don't want to know what you could suggest. So I want to know what you could suggest or speculate about the upcoming Avengers movie until 8. Like, who could they be facing, or who would be the heroes? I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Thanks for everything you do for the Post-Geek Singularity community. Well, Gerard, I appreciate the letter. And of course, I mean, look, all I know is that reading Marvel comic books for the last 40 years, even longer than that, but I was reading them a lot regularly over the last 40 years. There's a lot they could do. I mean, obviously, you don't necessarily have to have a universe-affecting threat. I could see that there was a stretch of time where there was the Dark Avengers, where through various machinations, a bunch of bad people, let's call them supervillains, took on the guise of the Avengers after the real Avengers, for various reasons, were deposed or sent away or things like that. And it became basically another conflict, maybe a global conflict. That could be something. They haven't introduced some of the bigger villains that are in the Marvel comic universe, like Kang the Conqueror, who travels through time. A lot of the X-Men villains, whether it's Magneto, Mr. Sinister, Apocalypse, Mojo. I mean, there's so many X-Men villains they could bring in. And there's also cosmic threats. So there's a lot of different things that they could do. But I absolutely think that they're going to make an Avengers. Now, remember, it took 4 years to work up to the Avengers. So let's skip 2020. And so we're only in the first year of Phase 4. Phase 4 has just begun. So in 4 more years, let's not expect another Avengers movie, maybe until 2025. I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. And they're going to slowly build to something. Maybe Galactus, maybe some other kind of a threat. Maybe a threat where the Avengers have to go somewhere. Extraterrestrial action, adventure. It's hard to say. I really don't know. I can tell you this. They already know what Avengers 5 is going to be. And I wouldn't be surprised if over the course of this we're going to meet the Young Avengers. I know we're meeting some of them. Doing a Young Avengers movie seems like someplace they could go even before there's another Avengers movie. It could be very interesting, but hard to say. I don't necessarily, I don't know, but I know you want me to tell you that there's a million different ways they could take it. And since I just read this off the cuff, I don't know, but I guarantee you they're going to make more Avengers movies. This comes from Anaru. Kia ora, Rob. That is Maori for hello. Anaru here, New Zealander living in Australia. Oh my God! So what do you do when the All Blacks come to town? And do you drink Monteith's Black? Boy, I wish I could get that beer. That was my favorite beer I was drinking in New Zealand. I have been watching you since Collider Heroes with our late King of the Sweaties, John Schnepp. I miss him. Me too. I still enjoy watching you and John Campea on the John Campea Show, Robservations. I appreciate your guys' understanding of how the movie industry works or doesn't, depending on many factors. As a lifelong fan of comic books and these characters, Marvel and DC, how can one group it so right, Marvel, and while the other gets it so wrong, DC? I mean, it's frustrating beyond belief. Warner Brothers consistently pisses off their fans, not knowing their audience wants and needs when they constantly voice their opinion. Their actors, Gal Gadot and Ray, treated disrespectfully. Their directors, Nolan, Villeneuve, and others, going behind their back, re HBO Max. I mean, they just go from one bad decision to another. I understand that, in part, their decision-making is bound by fiscal responsibility, but it seems like Warner Brothers only make their decisions based on money, i.e., we lost X amount of dollars, or it'll cost X amount of dollars, or Man of Steel should have made X amount of dollars. Says who? It's all about money, or getting a quick win by doing what's the thing that's in right now, i.e. race-swapping Superman, for example, not Calvin Ellis or Val Zod, but just straight race-swapping soups. They come across as lying and untrustworthy, money-grabbing suits. They lack respect for the material, the audience, and creatives. They just care about money. Kevin Feige and Marvel have earned the most successful film franchise in the history of Hollywood in only 11 years by doing the exact opposite. Warner Brothers have next to no level of cohesion and continuity. See Fox X-Men also for continuity. Marvel fits its movies and now series together like pieces of a large jigsaw puzzle, and while not all pieces are perfect, the overall tapestry is beautiful. Warner Brothers has virtually zero brand loyalty, no faith, and trust with the fans. The fans play a we'll wait and see approach. Marvel has so much goodwill and good faith, the audience also trusts almost everything they do. People know the brand, and generally speaking, they know what they'll get, much like Nike, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, sushi, and the All Blacks. The New Zealand rugby team, the most successful sports team in the history of the world with an 84% win record in over 100 years, by the way. Oh, I'm very familiar. As you know, I lived on and off in New Zealand for 3 years, from 2001 through 4 years. 2001 to 2004. I lived in Auckland. I lived in Oamaru. I lived in Christchurch. I lived in Wellington. I love New Zealand. Anyways, I wanted to say I love your work. I'm so frustrated with WB because I care about these characters and the great storytelling we're missing out on. If only Kevin Feige had DC, we would be like Jeff Bezos, King Solomon, and Mansa Musa, some of the richest people to have ever lived. In stories, not money. Your friend, Anaru. Well, Anaru, thank you for writing in. I very much appreciate it. First of all, I just want to say that the big difference between all of this is that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was basically started by Kevin Feige as the creative head of it all. One guy who cut his teeth producing 13, or he worked as a producer in some capacity on 13 Marvel movies before the MCU started. So he'd worked on everything from Daredevil and Ghost Rider to X-Men and Spider-Man, Elektra even. He saw what worked and what didn't work. And he was already a huge fanboy, huge Star Trek fan. He started working for Richard Donner. He was a guy that specialized literally in making superhero movies. That was his experience. And he saw what worked and what didn't. And he was smart enough to realize that, okay, what we need to do is start the MCU, starting it with Iron Man. And going back, I've said this before on the show, but going back, and if you watch Iron Man's a fairly intimate story about one man coming to grips with what was his position in the world? What did his company do? How did he affect the planet? Did he do good works or not? And I think that that's what's so interesting about Iron Man. Ultimately, he's in conflict with his former mentor for the heart of their company and his very own soul. And to think that we wound up with Thanos and Infinity War and Endgame, when you look at where Iron Man started, Kevin Feige understood what he was doing. And how did he understand that? He just said, you know what? What was it? What's the essence of what made Marvel popular with its own audience? And that's what they recreated cinematically and now on streaming services. Not something easy to do, but something you have to understand. But he was in charge. The difference at DC is DC doesn't have a Kevin Feige. Marvel had Kevin Feige, Victoria Alonso, and Louis D'Esposito. They run that studio. Yes, they're underneath Disney, but nobody at Disney is telling them what to do. Marvel Studios, just like at Pixar had people starting with John Lasseter and all the other people. They lived and breathed Pixar. That's all they did was make Pixar movies. And they're still winning Academy Awards after how many years now? And they know how to make animated films. just like the people that run Marvel know how to make superhero movies. Now, the thing is, Warner Brothers doesn't have like that. They don't have anyone. They didn't decide, okay, we're going to start our DC studios and we've got these people to head it up. They thought they did after the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. They're like, okay, Christopher Nolan and Zack Snyder will do things this way. But the difference is, the problem is that both Zack Snyder and Christopher Nolan are auteurs. They're people that are filmmakers. They didn't have some grand design about what you're going to do with the entire DC universe. Nobody there has. They've never had anybody that was like Kevin Feige there. Because Kevin Feige, he is the architect building this whole thing up as a producer, and then he produces the movies. The people at Warner Brothers, in addition to looking over after the DC movies, are looking after everything else Warner Brothers is making. So there's nobody there that every movie. Here's another difference. Even though the idea at the corporate level would be to, yes, we would love having a cinematic universe. Great, but you don't have the architect to do that for you. And the architect is not a filmmaker. The filmmaker is going to make their films. That's why if you look at what we've seen in terms of the DC universe, Todd Phillips, a filmmaker, made Joker. One-off. $65 million spend, it makes $1 billion. James Wan, a filmmaker, comes in and makes his wacky fantasy version of Aquaman that I adored. But that was James Wan doing that. No one, can you imagine? And those movies don't reconcile with one another. I don't want to see Todd Phillips' Joker in James Wan's Aquaman universe. I could imagine that maybe we could get the Amazons, and Themyscira could be seen in an Aquaman movie. But for the most part, that's what Warner Brothers is designed to do. They're a studio that has traditionally always serviced filmmakers. When I worked in feature production, the filmmakers that were working at Warner Brothers, Clint Eastwood's Malpaso Productions, I don't know how long they've been at Warner Brothers. It's got to be closing on 50 years, if not 50 years already. They have relationships with filmmakers that continue to this day. Christopher Nolan being a good example of that. He comes over, he makes Following, he makes Memento, and then Warner Brothers hires him to do their remake of Insomnia with Al Pacino. He makes Insomnia, and then they're like, ooh, Christopher Nolan, we're going to keep him in the fold. We like him. We like working with him. They're like, hey, Batman's kind of moribund, sitting on the shelf. Anything you could do? Can we throw it out to you? And Christopher Nolan, lo and behold, makes Batman. But I don't think Christopher Nolan was going, I've always wanted to make a Batman movie because I'm a big comic book fan. He might have been, but he makes his 3 Batman movies. They make the studio, and what does Christopher Nolan do? Christopher Nolan is in the Christopher Nolan business, not in the DC fanboy business. So Christopher Nolan, one for them, one for me, one for them, one for me. And for Warner Brothers, it works out. I want to make this cockamamie movie called Inception. Well, you just made us $1 billion on The Dark Knight. Go right ahead. And then, of course, Warner Brothers marketing was trying to say that, this movie was incomprehensible, and without our marketing team, we never would have had a hit. Yeah, really? Sure. You say whatever you want. But Christopher Nolan, they supported his vision. Now, Tenet, I respect them for trying. But again, Christopher Nolan is an auteurist filmmaker who's going to make more movies, and they're probably going to be really exciting and fun to watch. The problem is Warner Brothers is never going to treat DC like Marvel because they don't have Kevin Feige, and their entire infrastructure is not set up unless they started somebody who knew DC Comics. And the thing is, they were hoping they had people like that in terms of Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns, again, is a creator. He isn't he gets producing credits now, but he's not the architect because he didn't cut his teeth learning how movies are made. Now he's learned a lot more about making movies, but Kevin Feige they both started actually at Richard Donner, which is ironic, but then Kevin Feige went and developed his career producing superhero movies, where Jeff Johns became one of the preeminent DC comic writers of all time. But the problem is he doesn't have enough experience dealing with, he's got more experience now, but dealing with people and dealing with how to make movies the same way Kevin Feige does. They took different paths, and it didn't really work out for Jeff Johns. It's making movies, producing movies is tough. So, but I would say that DC, now you've got James Gunn doing Suicide Squad. I think DC's methodology now is let the filmmakers make the movies they want to make. Take our characters. They learn from Christopher Nolan. Let Christopher Nolan go make his movie. Then let Andy Muschietti do with The Flash what he wants. James Wan does Aquaman. Patty Jenkins does Wonder Woman. Even though Patty Jenkins didn't develop the first Wonder Woman, she came on. It was Michelle McLaren did, and then Patty Jenkins came on after Michelle McLaren left for creative differences. But I think DC's tactic that has worked for them is let the filmmakers come in and give us visions of these characters that we'll let you do. Drew Goddard or whatever, Matt Reeves, not Drew Goddard. Matt Reeves, you make the Batman you want to make, and I think that's their path to success. So it's just a different path. It's a different path. So, yeah. Stephen Thompson writes in, says, "Oh, mighty Robcaster, how your discussions of the 1980s has hit me in all the right ways. Like you, I'm very much a child of the 1980s, as I was born in the year of physical graffiti and wish you were here. For me, perhaps, the time was extremely formative. The hope and optimism of the 80s are, I suspect, as you pointed out, very much a draw. Let me explain my perspective. I spent a good portion of that decade growing up in Germany. My father was in the army and traveled every few years, and was part of the deal. This was unavoidable, and at one point we packed up and went to Germany. During this time, my curiosity about the world around me was awakened, and eventually, even as a young lad, my interests turned to history. Eventually, my interests were drawn to a city called West Berlin. Damn if that doesn't give away my age. I'd come home with maps of Berlin with the 4 sectors on them and show them to my father and ask him to explain, what was this about? And so he did, and that left me with more questions than answers. At one point, late in my 3rd grade year, my father announced that he had to travel to West Berlin on business. Are you in or are you out? He asked. Damn Skippy. I wanted to go there myself and see the Berlin Wall I was reading so much about. I wouldn't get to go until I was in the 4th grade, and when my 4th grade teacher found out I was going to Berlin, she insisted that I go to the museum at Checkpoint Charlie, dedicated to showing how people escaped East Germany. She had been there, and she was so enthusiastic at the thought of my going there, I honestly thought she was going to call my parents and tell them everything we needed to see once we got there. Sure enough, I got to see that museum and much else besides. It's all ingrained in my memory even now, and to make it even better, we drove there through checkpoints Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. I say all this to set this up. Had the 14-year-old me gone up to the 9-year-old me and said, see all this? It's all going to be gone before you turn 15. I would have thought me insane. Yet, that is exactly what happened. What was less than an ideal situation, to say the least, that was seemingly set in concrete, never to move, was gone. And the world had forever changed for the better before the 1980s ended. For me, such things epitomize the optimism of the decade. See, that's a really good point, man. What a great example. I'm glad you experienced that. That's a really great example. I could go on, but I'll address one other thing. The music. By the way, anytime you mention Los Angeles, or especially L.A., I say to myself, nobody walks in L.A. Yes, that's missing persons. Yes, I get a little obsessive about music, and what a decade to go through to open up with. Just grab a given top 40 list. The diversity on the list is astounding to me, especially now. I began that decade with my parents getting me a turntable with an AM/FM radio for Christmas, and I spent my time perusing the music available on the air at the time. To this day, I can't listen to 80s pop without thinking of those times. I had 2 older sisters who were all into the music scene to make things more interesting. As a bonus, when we were living in Germany, we were exposed to what people in Europe were listening to, as well as what was big music-wise back home in America. I remember well not only listening to just AFN radio, that would be Armed Forces News Radio, but also German radio. From time to time, my sister would go into town to the record store to buy some albums, and it was here we were further exposed to the European music scene. It was here she, and by extension I, would hear of a band that at the time barely registered in the United States, Depeche Mode, who for me is probably one of the most innovative bands to come out of the 80s. When they eventually took off after we'd moved back to the States, my sister and I were of the mind of, where have you been? Perhaps more important, though, is the fact that as much music as I heard in the 1980s, I began the decade as a curious boy surfing radio channels and listening to all the pop music I could, and I ended up as a teenage headbanger. My older sisters were all into the glam rock hair metal bands at the time, but I turned to the heavier and more dangerous world of heavy metal. They were all about bands like Warrant, Slaughter, and Poison. I was quickly finding myself in league with Slayer, Iron Maiden, Megadeth, Metallica, and the like. I guess the point of all this rambling is that all your points made about the 1980s were valid, and it's not surprising that the 80s really haven't left us. The innovation, creativity, and optimism that typified the decade are all draws. Did I mention that the pop music of the time was quite simply fun and joyous? As a final note, this was probably the last decade where students in schools were told by teachers that we need to learn the ways of computers as they are the way of the future. In 5th grade, I took a class called Computer Literacy. Do they even have such things in schools today? My family wouldn't have a computer in the family until the mid-90s, and I was the one who bought it. As such, we all had to interact with each other personally instead of hiding behind screens, emails, and texts. And I suspect we all had to be more civil with each other, as no one would dream of behaving toward each other the way they do now, say, on Twitter. If nothing else, civility, for the most part, and basic human interaction, that's enough reason to continue to venerate this decade that hasn't truly left us. Well, Stephen, what a good letter. What a great account. You know, what a great story. I mean, I'm going to be thinking about that for a long time. Here you learn all about how the wall was erected, and you actually go to Berlin. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting is that one of my favorite movies of all time is Wings of Desire, Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire, and that movie was made before the wall fell. And soon after, and it's as much about the city of Berlin as it is about angels and mortality and all that. And then when he made the sequel, by the way, Criterion, please give me the sequel, Far Away So Close, on Blu-ray. As a matter of fact, anybody get me the sequel and make sure it's subtitled in English, please. But what Far Away So Close is all about is what happens when the wall does fall. And I think that that's, I mean, let me tell you, I can't imagine going there and then a couple years later, after learning all about it, it's gone. And I think that's something else. What a great, I mean, in terms of, I never have thought about that. I mean, I've thought about that in terms of Wings of Desire and Far Away So Close, but in terms of being a kid in Germany and actually going there and seeing that museum and driving through the checkpoints to checkpoint Charlie and have that happen, what a cool thing. I love that idea. You know what else? I'll tell you what else I love. I love letters from Willow Yang. And I have one. Of course, Willow Yang has been just going through, for months, she's been going through the entire Star Trek franchise. She's written about all of the shows. This is another one about Star Trek Voyager. Willow Yang, take it away. By the way, if you want to find more of Willow Yang's letters, you can find them on the Burnettwork.net website under Willow Talk. Oh, hi, Rob. I'm writing to discuss the delightful Voyager episode, Course Oblivion. Oh, I like this episode. To give a recap, everything's rosy on board the Voyager. Tom and B'Elanna get married. I must have missed that relationship since I've only been watching select episodes from the series. And the crew are just about 2 years away from finally reaching the Alpha Quadrant. And then B'Elanna suddenly falls ill and dies. And things just quickly go downhill from there. As more and more people fall ill and perish, Chakotay and Tuvok make the shocking discovery that they're in fact not the actual Voyager crew at all, but rather clones formed after the events of the earlier episode, Demon, where a planet containing silver blood created copies of the Voyager crew using their DNA. The clones, however, also carried all of the memories of their progenitors, and eventually they began believing that they were the actual Voyager crew and embarked on a journey back toward the Alpha Quadrant. In spite of being told that they needed to return to their native planet to survive, the clone Janeway insists on staying on course, even though the crew were unlikely to survive another 2 months, much less 2 years. More and more people die over time, and the ship itself, which is also made from the silver blood, falls apart. Finally, Janeway turns Voyager around to head back to their native planet and orders for the creation of a time capsule with all of their personal logs and records. It soon becomes apparent, however, that they were not going to make it back. Attempts to launch their time capsule also fail. Eventually, the last surviving crew members, with Kim now as captain since Janeway had also succumbed, detect a ship and attempt to send out a distress call. Meanwhile, not too far away, the real Voyager receives the call and heads over to the coordinates, but it's too late. All that remains is a cloud of silver blood floating in space. Not understanding what had just happened, the real Janeway orders Voyager to continue on their course back home. The end. As you can probably tell from the synopsis that I've given, it's a series that's known for its messages of optimism and hope. Course Oblivion certainly does not present a particularly positive outlook on life. I was wondering if someone in the writer's room was experiencing an existential crisis when they created the episode, and then I realized that it was actually Brian Fuller who's the credited writer. Pretty much the main takeaway I got from the story is that your life is meaningless, your struggles are futile, and once you've died, nobody will remember you, and it's as if you never existed. Which, to be fair, is probably true for a vast majority of people. Most of us are never going to achieve anything of note. We aren't going to find our names documented in the annals of history, and if we took a few steps further back, the entire history of humanity, of Earth itself, ultimately will have no impact on the great cosmos. There are many stars that we can currently see in the skies that have since burned out, and it's only because they're so distant that the light they once emitted have not faded yet. And we will never know what life and civilizations might have once existed in those systems. And someday, in a few billion years, the same will happen to our sun, and it will be as if Earth never existed. That's a really bright and inspirational thought to start the day. In spite of the rather dour themes, I absolutely loved Course Oblivion, an opinion that may be somewhat controversial given that it appears to have garnered a rather polarizing reaction among Star Trek fans. Personally, I like to view this episode as the cynical, twisted antithesis to the Next Generation's much-lauded The Inner Light. Perhaps I'm just slow, but I did not see the mid-story twist coming. When B'Elanna died, I thought that this must be another time travel episode, as Voyager has done on so many occasions. The reveal completely caught me off guard. The episode is strongly reminiscent of the Deep Space Nine Whispers episode. In that story, it's told from the perspective of not the actual characters that we've been following on the show, but from a clone of them that shared all of their memories and personalities. This, of course, raises various questions about identity. What exactly makes a person unique? How is the clone of O'Brien, who was callously dispatched at the end of Whispers, different from the original O'Brien? Is the Riker clone that the transporter created in the Next Generation Second Chances not the same person as the Riker we've been following throughout the series? The Silver Blood clone of Janeway stated, if everything about us was duplicated, that includes our memory engrams, the emotional centers of our brain. So if you feel something, remember something, believe something, I'm not about to tell you it's not real. Are the clones the same people as the original Voyager crew if they shared all their memories and personalities? Do they need to have actually lived and experienced those memories to be real? This leads me to the more intimate personal story of the characters, in addition to the broader existential angst that's explored in Course Oblivion. There is a real tragedy in the tale of the doomed Silverblood clones as they forgot who they actually were, how they'd come into existence as they embarked on their journey to the Alpha Quadrant, driven by the memories of home and family and friends. This is most memorably encapsulated in the scene where the crew encounters a Class Y planet, similar to their own homeworld, but gets attacked by an alien ship there. Even though the clones could have fought back and destroyed their attacker, they chose to retreat, putting their Starfleet values above their own survival. Again, I hearken back to Whispers, to the ending where the dying O'Brien clone, in its final breath, calls out to Keiko. In both instances, it isn't just that the clones met an untimely and lonely end, but also the fact that they died whilst holding on to something that arguably isn't real. Keiko will never know of the love that the O'Brien clone had for her, and Starfleet will never know of the existence of the Silver Blood clones. This just adds an extra layer of tragedy to the already depressing situation. All in all, I thought Course Oblivion was great. It's one of my favorites from the admittedly limited number of Voyager episodes that I've seen so far. From just an entertainment perspective, the story is engaging, with a twist that managed to catch me completely off guard and a devastatingly realistic ending. Yet it simultaneously asks existential questions about identity, agency, and the meaning of life itself. What is the point of our existence if our actions do not matter in the grand scheme of things? Does just living in the moment, fighting for the things that we believe in, as insignificant and futile as our struggles might be, make our existence worthwhile? As Angel once concluded in the eponymously labeled series. If nothing we do matters, then all that matters is what we do. Live long and prosper, Willow. Again, Willow, knocking it out of the park. You're a storyteller, Willow. You always get those little. I can't wait to read your first novel. That's going to be really interesting. I really look forward to reading that. Speaking of Star Trek, Dallas writes in. Dallas says, "Hello, Rob and company. I've finally done it. My fiance is finally watching Star Trek for the first time. She's actually loving it, and I know that's true because she's actually talking about the show when not watching it. We're well into season 4, but I've been thinking about the season 2 episode 19, the data-centric episode, The Measure of a Man, written by Melinda Snodgrass, for weeks since rewatching it for the first time in a few years. The central premise of the episode is well known by most, if not all, in the community, but the Reader's Digest version of the plot is that Picard has to prove in court that Data should be afforded the same rights as fellow Starfleet members of flesh and blood and that he is not property. This is one of my favorite episodes of The Next Generation, but I didn't remember how much of the episode actually dealt with Data's resignation from Starfleet. Starfleet initially rejects Data's resignation and claims that he is property, but if Data cannot resign from Starfleet, how is he admitted in the first place? Picard had to argue that Data is sentient, but wasn't that argument already made by Starfleet when they accepted him into the Academy? The drama of sentient versus non-sentient beings made for amazing TV and is one of my favorite episodes. But thinking about it further, I just can't think past, well, if Starfleet admitted Data into their ranks of his own submission, how can we deny his resignation if we in good faith accepted him to Starfleet in the first place? I'm curious to know what you and the fellow viewers had to say about this. You know what, Dallas? That's a really good point. And as many people know, one of the things that I'm most proud of about working on the Next Generation Blu-rays is that we got the extended version of Measure of a Man that's 13 minutes longer. Not only is it on that Blu-ray set, but the first time it ever screened was in 1,200 theaters across the U.S. along with Q-Who as a Fathom event. And that was one of the great things that we were able to do working on that show. So I love the show. You know, it never really occurred to me before, to be honest. As many times as I've seen that episode and as much as we worked on it and as long as I talked to Melinda Snodgrass, it never occurred to me that because Starfleet let him in, they themselves admitted that he is a sovereign individual. And you know as well as I do, being a sovereign individual is what all of our society, that's basically what Western society is promised, that each and every person is an individual, and that Western civilization is designed around providing life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness for people that are sovereign individuals. But that's a really interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, really great stuff. Great letter. Thanks for that. But I think you're right. That's a really interesting, God, what a really interesting question to ponder. Omar94 has written in, go figure. Hi, Rob, moderators in the Post-Geek Singularity. Since we are getting a new Superman movie with J.J. Abrams will produce and Ta-Nehisi Coates will write, I started thinking about what I want to see in a Superman movie. Oftentimes, we will hear about how hard it is to write for Superman because creators are not sure how to create conflict for him. However, in my experience of reading the comics and seeing adaptations of Superman, the best Superman stories are the ones which focus on the man aspect, not the super. Looking at the first two Richard Donner movies, the Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, Alan Burnett DC Animated Universe series, and comics like Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman and both Alan Moore's For the Man Who Has Everything and Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, these stories work because they focused on the man, not the super. So with that said, a story I think would make a great Superman movie where the focus is on the man and not the super is an adaptation of the Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale comic series, Superman, A Man for All Seasons. I love it. It's a very sweet, sentimental story about the core of who Superman is and what he is about. While I would not have a problem with this, the only problem I think is people would have with the story would be the same problem some had with Superman Returns, which was the lack of action scenes. There are some set pieces in the story, but I don't know if it would be enough for some people. The set pieces in this story, which I can recall, are a tornado, a burning building, Superman going underwater and bringing a submarine out of the ocean, and Superman stopping a speeding train. I think there are more, but I can't completely recall them. I know we're getting a completely different take on Superman now with Abrams and Coates, but I would really be interested in seeing a story like Superman for All Seasons being made. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Omar, you're not wrong. I would love to see that made. I love that book. I've got the Absolute Edition. I'd love to see that get done. I don't think it's ever going to get done, though, for that reason. There's no action scenes in it. People are like, well, he doesn't even fight anybody. Superman doesn't fight anyone. Oh, my God, we can't have that. I mean, when Superman did have one of the most epic fights ever in Man of Steel, people bitched. So, I don't know. But I think that's they could definitely adapt that in Superman and Lois. As a matter of fact, I would love to see that adapted as part of Superman and Lois. I don't know if they ever would do it, but they might. Let's see what you guys are saying. Robert Conrad sends in a couple of tips. He says, "Hi, Rob. I'm watching the original Star Trek series again, and I'm on Season 1, Episode 8. I started with The Cage." Oh, man. "And then Where No Man Has Gone Before. This show never gets old, and the chemistry between Leonard and Shatner is amazing. It made me think about their friendship. It's sad that there was friction between them before Leonard passed. I was so pissed at Shatner for not attending the funeral, but glad he supported Adam Nimoy on his documentary. Cheers, Rob, and with the Post-Geek Singularity." Well, Robert, you're right. I just wish... One of my pet peeves is nowadays, because of streaming, everybody watches The Cage first. And then, of course, The Cage is then repeated in the Menagerie 1 and 2. I wish people... The Cage was rejected. It was a rejected pilot. And I think the only way you can watch The Cage as far as it's really meant to be seen in Star Trek is to enjoy it as part of the 2-part first season episodes, the Menagerie Parts 1 and 2. I understand why everybody watches it. And nowadays with Captain Pike and all that, it does feel like the first episode of Star Trek. But I think The Cage is much better and has a lot more resonance if you watch it as part of the Menagerie Part 1 and Part 2. I could be wrong, but that's how I feel about it. But I'm glad you're enjoying it. I feel the same way about Star Trek. It's timeless, and I love it. I love it. So yeah, I'm glad you're digging it. I mean, write in more. What are some of your favorite episodes? What are things you notice? After every season, give us, Mr. Conrad, give us a wrap-up of things you notice about the original series. I'd love to see that. Willow's here. She says, out of curiosity, what do you consider to be cancel culture? While I disagree with those who claim that it isn't real, I also think that there are some people who are exploiting the term. Oh, absolutely. Look, the way I see cancel culture, to me, what it means to me, is that if you have a viewpoint that, like, for instance, college campuses, what I don't understand is you might have people that you might find them questionable. Whether it's, I only know this because Ben Shapiro has talked about this. Ben Shapiro he's had to hire guards to protect him. There are people that don't like Ben Shapiro, and they come protest and things like that. What I don't like is I don't like that you can summon a mob and go after people without truly understanding who and what they really are or what they really represent. To me, cancel culture we live in a time where cancel culture doesn't really take into consideration everything a person has to say or what they've done in the past. It makes an assumption and then decides to take action on what I think is a wrong assumption. And people gleefully go after others, literally trying to ruin their livelihood or ruin their lives over some kind of a perceived slight. Most of the time with people that you're never going to interact with, that aren't going to affect your life anyway, but they come into your sights and you decide to go after them. And the idea is to literally destroy someone. Now, I think that there are some people, criminals and people that have engaged in less than honorable behavior, but I don't necessarily think anybody should summon a mob, because here's what I don't like about cancel culture most of all, is that somehow people believe that they have been, anointed or given the power, or they are somehow righteous. So they are, beyond criticism themselves. So they've taken upon themselves to right some kind of wrong. Well, who are they to suddenly become avenging angels? What gives them the right? I mean, it seems strange, and I think gleefully it's any mob of any kind, as we've seen throughout history, isn't good. And I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. You know, I've seen it firsthand, and it's happened to me. And it was interesting. It was interesting to watch because I had to sit there and be like, wow, the people that were coming after me, who I thought that I had a reasonably good relationship with, albeit it was very limited because they didn't even watch my show, they were coming after me and accusing me of things that weren't true, and that weren't even taking into consideration anything that my life had stood for, such as it is, up until that point. And they were going after me anyway. And what was interesting about that, they didn't take into consideration my family, anything else that was going on in my life, the fact that the situation that they created, I didn't even create it. Something I said was taken out of context and reframed by somebody that believed something of me, that wanted to apparently believe something of me, and they created their own spin on a narrative and perpetuated it specifically to go after me. To, I don't know, were they trying to ruin my life? It didn't ruin my life that much, but it was a problem for a while. And what they created in my life, which didn't exist and wasn't true, they literally made something up and reframed what I had done. They took my words, and yes, they retweeted my words with their own opinion, but they took my words out of the context of a video that it was attached to and reframed what I had said. By the way, after I'd already apologized, because I think I didn't make my point very well. So I had already issued an apology, and I didn't take down my initial tweet right away. I left it standing, apologized for it, and still they went after me on purpose to do harm. And that's what I think the real insidious part about cancel culture is I don't see a lot of people wanting to. There is a desire to harm others that is inherent to what cancel culture is, which I don't understand, because that means that people are accepting a position where they are intentionally trying to do harm to others, and I don't understand why. People that you've never met, people that you don't know, people that you have no understanding of what their station or situation in life is, but you want to take it upon yourself to somehow hurt them if you can, which I don't understand. Are you trying to take revenge for people that hurt you? So now you want to make sure that somebody doesn't do something to anybody else, so you're gonna start this mob mentality? It's really weird and dangerous and strange. I don't get it. Preston Bell says, Rob, I heard that if you speed up the slow motion scenes in Zack Snyder's Justice League, the movie would be 2 hours long. Just kidding. I just made that up. Well, you know, I mean, people say that I like the slow motion scenes create a feeling, which I think is kind of unique. I like it. I think it's cool. Luigi Corbucci says, Rob, please explain why the Italian genre film is dead. We used to get films by Bava, Argento, Fulci, and others, but the genre film seems to be deader than a doornail in Italy right now. What killed the Italian genre film industry? Signed, Luigi. Well, Luigi, I guess, look, not only that, what about all the Giallo movies, all the crime thrillers, everything that was happening in the 60s and 70s? What about Italian sex films and Italian comedies? Genre cinema in general, I honestly, I don't know. I mean, I loved Italian cinema of the 60s and 70s and 80s. I couldn't answer that because I don't live in Italy. I don't know what happened, but maybe some people thought that it just was beneath the Italian spirit. I don't know why. I love Italian genre cinema, and it's sad. I don't know. I mean, maybe one day, maybe the filmmakers themselves just stopped making movies, or maybe people weren't financing those films. I don't know, Luigi. I don't know why, but we're all the lesser for it. A Hidden Gem sends in a tip and says, Robert, have you ever seen the film Hit, directed by Sidney J. Furie and starring Billy D. Williams? I have not. It's a great international thriller made by Furie, featuring some of his Lady Sings the Blues cast. Richard Pryor has a nice role in the film. Man, I'll look that up, although Sidney Furie is really hit and miss for me. 70s Sidney Furie is great. 80s Sidney Furie, not so much. Terrier is here all the way from Norway. Terje Tiberius Mork says, Following up on your claim of no double use of iconic music in movies, I agree. Nice trailer for Carnage, but One Is the Loneliest Number will forever belong to Magnolia. I would agree with you there, but isn't it a different version? I'm not sure. Terrier comes in and asks something else and says, I saw Star Trek The Next Generation yesterday in virtual cinema via VR, Oculus Quest 2, and it was amazing. Other people were there, and it was fun. Suggestion for a show topic, VR theaters. Look, I think that's absolutely valid. I would love to go to do something like that. I think it'd be great. Jeff Mesherman became a member of the channel. Thank you, Jeff. I hope you don't miss our next chat. Wind Goddess sends in a super chat. Thank you, Wind Goddess. Andrew Christie says, a combination of VR and gaming. So we're essentially headed towards Ready Player One. I'm in. Yeah, I think we are. I think we absolutely are. And if you're a fan of Neil Stephenson, or you're a fan of Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, which is one of my favorite books I've ever read, or why am I drawing a blank on William Gibson, Neuromancer? Why not? It's coming. That VR world is coming. Insomatic 101 sends in a super chat and says, hey, Rob, a few days ago I rewatched the Rush Hour trilogy, and it made me wonder, why don't they make mid-budget comedy movies anymore? The studios just don't, man. I mean, and that mid-budget comedy kind of died a slow, painful, quick death. I mean, even recently, I Love You, Man, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and Get Him to the Greek. I love those movies. Although we had things like Game Night, but those are like action comedies. I think the studios just kind of lost interest, and then indie films are that's really a great studio genre. That mid-budget comedy is just sort of gone. I mean, I guess Coming to America could be considered one, but that was a sequel. So, yeah. Butthurt Joe Blow sends in a tip and says, geez, there's not any white male leads anywhere. I never see a white guy's lead anywhere in any movie or streaming show over the air or an over-the-air series. I'm so depressed and I'm so oppressed. I'm going to go pound sand and drown in a bathtub of wokeness. Bye. Butthurt Joe Blow. Yep. I feel your pain. Come on, man. That was funny. I like that. The Nerdporeal Lifeform says, Rob, I made a 100 sub milestone video, and I quoted you. Well, thank you, but how did you quote me? I guess, everyone, we need to go over to the Nerdporeal Lifeform channel on YouTube and watch his 100 sub milestone video and hear what wise pearls that I had to say that the Nerdporeal Lifeform used. Well, thank you, Nerdporeal Lifeform. I appreciate that. I hope it was a good quote, and I hope it was inspiring. Congratulations on your first 100 subs. On your way to 1,000, getting that 4,000 hours of watch time and 1,000 subs, getting that channel monetized. Good for you, sir. Just like they say in Santa Claus is Coming to Town, put one foot in front of the other, and soon you'll be walking out the door. Well done. Lou Terrazas is here. Hey, Rob. Man, you looked sad on Campia today with talk of the Golden Globes. I know, man, but look, I grew up in Hollywood. It's full of snakes. Should we be that surprised? I don't know what the answer is, but this world just has so many villains who love power, no matter what. I know. But the Golden Globes, maybe they'll evolve. Who knows? I just think that I like the idea of there was an actual organization around the world of press from the rest of the world that would tell us what they liked about Hollywood, because the output's there. But, the world's changing. The world is changing. Papas 5 or Papas V, Papas 5 said, hey, I don't know, but I like Star Trek Generations. Is that okay? Of course it is. I see the talk here is big for Star Trek, but I like the story between Kirk and Picard the most of anything. To me, it's the finest moment ever. Am I crazy? How do I say this? Kalitichi brother? I don't know that. I don't think you're crazy. I mean, if you want to like Generations, you can. My only problem with Star Trek Generations is I think Captain Kirk's out of character. Admiral Kirk's out of character. I think that, and the storyline, I don't, the idea of the Nexus ribbon, to me, I can't, it shatters my disbelief that there's somehow a spacefaring energy ribbon that is actually the doorway to a dimension that when you get in there, this spacefaring energy can read what it is you want and materializes your fondest wish, or where there's a lot of leaping there. I guess I can't reconcile an energy ribbon with a sort of a sentient life form or something. I just don't buy it. I don't buy it. And I think it's all over the place. But, you know, the Kirk Spock stuff, I don't begrudge you for liking it at all. So I'm glad you like it. Joe Dick sends in a super chat. If Noonien Sung had patented his invention, there's no need to disassemble data. Sung starts printing money, buys himself a moon and some Orion slave girls. Yes, but as we know from the episode, and as we saw in Star Trek Picard, everything that happened on that episode, we threw it aside and we created a slave race. That's what the Federation did in the time of Picard. Let's create a slave race. So there you go. Mr. Australia says, hey, mate, I've been drinking a lot of Voodoo Rangers because of your intense midnight metals. Ha! You owe me big time, mate. Do you know what a chap is to do with all this crikey talk of globes? How can I become even more metal in my life? Well, you know what? I think the way to become the most metal in your life is to become the biggest, the best individual self that you are. Stake your claim, plant your flag as an individual, and stand on that. Make that who you are. Let the world see you as an individual. That you're the only person that can be you. You're the best you that you could possibly be. That's the most metal way to be. Evan Newman says, did you see the new Green Knight trailer that A24 dropped today? Looks like in-your-face fantasy mixed with some Midsommar-esque weirdness. Oh, and it's based on a classic King Arthur tale. I'm in. Yes, Evan, I too am in. I thought that trailer was freaking great. I loved it. Oh, wait, I'm getting messaged. Have I missed out on these messages? Anyway, maybe not. So, yes. Stubble McShave says, hi, Rob, how are the 700 show interviews coming along just 2 weeks ago? So far, I'm booking them. I haven't done one yet, so we'll see. I'm waiting to hear back. Actually, I've heard back from one person trying to organize. That'll be great, but I have yet to hear. So, yeah, working on that. Torrin Atkinson sends in a super chat and says, working on a special podcast honoring my friend who has terminal cancer. Friends, tell your loved ones how you feel about them. More later. Well, Torrin, I'm very, very sorry to hear that. That's terrible. But I think it's really cool what you're doing to honor your friend. A fan of BL Alley says, what happened to BL Alley? I adored his videos and skits, and he was an active member of the chat and the channel. I hope he's okay and doing well, as do I. Also, can we get the minimum value for Stream Elements chat down to $1 again? More bang for my buck. I'll tell you two things. The reason that some people have asked, why did I change the Stream Elements minimum from $1 to $3? I felt that certain people were abusing that privilege and sending me things, belaboring certain points. I had some complaints that there was some overtly political conversations, and people were using the dollar tips to send in things to me, because I will read any chat, any live chat, for the most part. And I figured, okay, you know, I was going to make it a little harder, so I did up the minimum to $3 for the tips, which, again, I apologize for, but that was because I was happy to leave it at $1. But when I started, there were people that were abusing that to turn the chat into something that it shouldn't be, which was divisive and political, and And so I figured to stop that, to curtail that. And by the way, it happened a lot more than just once. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but it was something that I did for that reason. I mean, sometimes you have to take precautions. So far, it's been working out well. And maybe I'll put it back to $1. As far as BL Alley, I really don't know. I know he had some static with some people, and I feel really bad about that. I really liked BL Alley. I really liked him participating. I think the channel is actually diminished without him on it. By the way, if you miss BL Alley is an author, and you can go to Amazon and get his books, like Relative Age, which is a time travel story. So I would suggest doing that. And I also hope BL Alley is well. I really hope he is. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, however you identify across these 28 known galaxies, I'm going to bring Robservations episode number 685 to a close. I would like to thank my moderating staff, beginning with Mike Bodden and the Richard. Justin Toner is here today. Louise X. Sparrow is here today from the UK. I don't know who else is here, but I hope you're all having a good time. Justin Toner, I already said that. Hello, Justin. Getting some good Blu-rays is Justin. But thank you all for being here. I also want to thank everybody for supporting the channel via tips and super chats, and that's helping. And if you want to become a member, please do so. We are going to have this weekend. Saturday is my birthday, so I'm going to do a show, but I'm also doing a panel. You know, I've done the Mainframe Comic Con. The guys who are putting the Mainframe Comic Con on. As a matter of fact, I need to get. They made a graphic, and I need to get it because let's see. On Saturday, I'm doing a pretty interesting thing. At 1 o'clock, 1 p.m. Pacific time, I'm doing the VHS Massacre panel at the Mid-May Massacre convention. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'll have more information on that beginning tomorrow. And then I'm also doing a panel on Sunday where I'm interviewing some of the people behind Psycho Gorman. If you have yet to see that, you should, because it's a lot of fun. So on that note, I will bid you all. Where was I? I was going to say, remember, if you want to write me letters too, free of charge, you can at the Burnettwork.net website. And we will have, if you become a member of the channel, we are going to have a Zoom chat sometime this weekend, probably on Sunday instead of Saturday, because Saturday, as everyone knows, it's my birthday, and Saturday night, I'm going to see my first movie in 15 months. I'm going to the world-famous Chinese theater, and I'm going to go see Army of the Dead in IMAX now that I am fully vaccinated. Yay me. So going to Hollywood Boulevard, going to the Chinese, cannot wait. Cannot wait. So I'm doing the panel. I'll do my birthday show. We'll do Robservations for my birthday. Going to see my first movie. And then Sunday, we're going to do Let's Get Physical Media, probably starting either an hour early, I would imagine, starting at 10 instead of 11. And then, going to make it all happen. Take my passion and make it happen. So that's what's going to happen. And tonight, we are doing another whining about movies. We are watching, as Dieter Bastian likes to call it, my autobiography. That's right, Rob's autobiography, Another Round, with Mads Mikkelsen getting his drink on. So we'll be here. The Ace and I will be here at 7:30 tonight talking about Another Round. So we'll see you there. And on that note, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to all of you, have a better day.